After a tough breakup, I moved to start fresh, only to cross paths with a sad girl, Ava, on a balcony across from mine. Our connection grew, talks, a kiss, until I realized her boyfriend was Jake, my ex-best friend who betrayed me with my ex, Sarah. The shock deepened when Ava admitted she was Sarah, reinvented, with Jake aware of me all along. Feeling used, I cut ties, moved on, and later learned they split. Ignoring her pleas, I passed our old building without a look, closing that chapter for good. After the breakup that left me raw, I knew I had to get out, start fresh somewhere new. I packed my life into boxes, the tape screeching as I sealed them, and moved to a quiet neighborhood across town. The new apartment was small, but mine, the walls bare, and I unpacked slowly, muttering, "New beginning, right?" A neighbor knocked, an older guy with a grin. "Settling in?" he asked, and I nodded. "Yeah, trying to." The place felt empty, but it was a start. I landed a new job, nothing fancy, just office work to keep me busy. The first day, I sat at my desk, the computer humming, and a coworker leaned over. "First week?" she asked, and I said, "Yeah, fresh start." The routine was simple, emails, meetings, and I focused on it, pushing the past away. This could work. I told myself, the office a distraction from the ache. The pay was decent, and I figured, time to rebuild. Evenings became my escape. I'd walk the streets after work. The air cool against my face, the neighborhood alive with quiet charm. "Nice change," I said, passing a park where kids played. A friend called, "How's the new spot?" And I replied, "Getting there." The walks cleared my head, the breakup sting faded with each step, and I felt a flicker of hope. The city lights guided me, and I thought, this is my chance. Then I noticed her. From my balcony, I'd see a girl across the way, always on her own, a book or cigarette in hand. She was beautiful, her dark hair catching the light, but her expression was sad, almost lost. "Who's she?" I muttered, leaning on the railing. One night, she lit a cigarette to glow faint, and I watched, saying, "Looks like she's carrying something too." Her balcony became a quiet ritual, her presence a mystery I couldn't ignore. The days settled into a rhythm. I'd come home, the door creaking, and check the window. There she was, reading or smoking, her face turned to the sky. "Same routine," I said, grabbing a coffee. A neighbor waved from below. "Seen the view yet?" And I laughed. "Yeah, it's something." Work kept me grounded. Another coworker asked, "Settling in?" And I said, "Slowly." But my eyes kept drifting to her, the sad girl, a silent companion. I started lingering on the balcony. One evening, I stepped out, the air crisp, and saw her with a book, her brow furrowed. "Wonder what she's reading," I said to myself. She glanced up, catching my eye for a second, then looked away. Did she see me? I muttered, stepping back. A friend texted, "Lonely yet?" And I replied, "Not really," though her presence stirred something. The breakup's pain dulled, and she became part of my new start. The neighborhood grew familiar. I walked past her building, the brick weathered, and thought, maybe she's new too. A shopkeeper nodded, "Good area, huh?" And I agreed, "Yeah, quiet." Back home, I'd see her again, cigarette smoke curling, and say, "She's always there." The routine comforted me. Work, walks, her balcony, and I felt the past loosening its grip. This could be home, I told myself, the sad girl a quiet thread in my days. Her presence intrigued me. One night, she sat with a book, the pages turning slowly, and I leaned out, saying, "What's her story?" She lit another cigarette, the flame flickering, and I watched, adding, "Looks like trouble." A friend stopped by, "Nice view," and I nodded, "Yeah, it's got character." The balcony became my spot, her silhouette a puzzle, and I thought, maybe she's healing too. The weeks blended. I settled into the job, a manager saying, "Good work," and I replied, "Thanks," getting there. Evenings I'd walk, the streets familiar, and check her balcony. Book, cigarette, sadness. "She's a constant," I said, sipping tea. A neighbor asked, "Met anyone?" And I shrugged, "Not yet." The new start took shape, the breakup a fading memory, and her across the way a quiet intrigue in my rebuilding life. The next day, I stood on the balcony, the sun setting, and saw her again, book closed, staring into the distance. Wonder what's on her mind. I muttered, "A friend called, how's the move?" And I said, "Good, really good." The sad girl with her cigarette became a fixture, her presence a soft challenge to my solitude. New start, new stories. I thought, ready to see where this path led. A few weeks into my new routine, I ran into her for the first time, literally. I was heading down the stairs, my mind on work, when I bumped into someone, book scattering. Oh, sorry, I said, bending to help. She looked up, her dark eyes meeting mine, and smiled faintly. No worries, she replied, gathering her things. I'm Ava, she added, her voice soft, and I nodded. Michael. New here. The encounter was brief, but her presence lingered. She shared a bit. I work remotely, she said, brushing hair from her face, and live with my boyfriend, but he's away a lot. I raised an eyebrow, tough schedule, and she shrugged. Yeah, he traveled for work. I felt a flicker of interest, her quiet beauty, the sadness I'd seen from my balcony, but pushed it down. Not ready for that. I muttered to myself, the breakup's still fresh. She picked up her last book, saying, see you around, and I replied, hope so, the words slipping out. Our paths crossed more often. A few days later, I met her in the lobby, mail in hand. Hey, Michael, she said, smiling, and I waved. Ava, right? She nodded, getting the hang of this place? I grinned, slowly. The chat was short, but her voice stayed with me. She's taken. I reminded myself, climbing the stairs, the attraction of quiet hum I ignored. A neighbor passed, new friend, and I laughed. Just a neighbor. The coincidences grew. One evening, I stepped out for a walk and saw her locking her door. Out again, she asked, and I said, yeah, clears my head. She fell into step, same here, and we walked a block, the silence comfortable. Boyfriend away? I ventured, and she nodded, always. I felt a pull, her loneliness mirroring mine, but thought, too soon, suppressing it. A friend called busy night, and I replied, just walking, keeping it vague. Another encounter came at the mailbox. More bills, I joked, and she laughed, same. She leaned against the wall, saying, it's quiet without him, and I asked, long trips? She sighed, weeks sometimes. The sadness in her eyes drew me, but I stepped back. Gotta get inside. The attraction a whisper I fought. A co-worker texted, settling in, and I said, yeah, meeting people to lie small. The pattern continued. One morning, I saw her with coffee, the steam rising. Early start. I asked, and she smiled, work calls. I nodded, same, and we stood a moment, the air charged. He's gone again, she said softly, and I felt a tug, quickly saying, take care, heading up, not ready. I told myself, the balcony girl becoming a quiet temptation. A friend visited, seen anyone? And I shrugged, just neighbors. The hints built. One evening, I was on my balcony, and she appeared on hers, book in hand. Good read? I called, and she looked over. Yeah, you? I held up mine. Trying. She laughed, we're a pair, and I smiled. Seemed so. The distance felt intentional, her boyfriend a barrier, but the attraction grew. Keep it friendly, I said, stepping inside, the pull hard to ignore. A neighbor waved, nice night, and I agreed, yeah, peaceful. The tension lingered. A few days later, we met at the trash bins. Busy day, she asked, and I said, work stuff. She tossed a bag, saying, same, he's still away, and I nodded, must be tough. Her eyes held mine a beat too long, and I felt it, the spark, but muttered, not my place. Walking off. A friend texted any dates, and I replied, no, just settling. The attraction a secret I buried. The week ended with another meeting. I was locking my door, and she came down, heading out. I asked, and she said, just a walk. I joined her, saying, good idea, and we talked, weather, work, her laughter light. He's back soon, she mentioned, and I felt a pang, suppressing it with, nice for you. Back home, I thought, she's trouble I can't handle. The unnoticed attraction a quiet challenge. The next day at work, a co-worker asked, met anyone? And I said, just neighbors, the lie growing easier. As the weeks rolled on, my encounters with Ava grew into something more than chance. One afternoon, I saw her in the hall, a coffee cup in hand, and nodded. Hey, Ava. She smiled. Michael, right? Rough day. I shrugged, work's a grind. And she said, same here, remote life. We stood a moment, the silence easy, and I felt a connection, our shared solitude. Want to grab a coffee sometime? I asked, and she nodded. Why not? Our talks began small. The next day, we met at the mailboxes, and I offered, got an extra cup if you're up for it. She accepted. Thanks, I could use it. And we sat on the steps, sipping. Lonely without him around? I ventured, and she sighed. Yeah, he's gone so much. I nodded. I get it, post-breakup quiet. And she looked at me. That explains it. The coffee warmed us, and I thought, she gets me? The loneliness a bridge. The conversations deepened. One evening, I saw her on her balcony, book closed, and called, "Long day?" She leaned over, endless calls, and I laughed, joined the club. She smiled, "Maybe I will," and a few days later, she knocked, "Got a minute?" I opened the door, "Sure," and we chatted, work, life, the quiet. "Feels good to talk," she said, and I agreed. "Yeah, it does." The connection growing. The invitation came unexpectedly. One sunset, I stood on my balcony, the sky ablaze, and she appeared across the way. "Your view's better," she called, and I grinned. "Come see." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, just for that." She arrived with a bottle of wine, saying, "Thought we could share," and I fetched glasses. "Good call." We sat, the colors stunning, and I poured. To new friends, toasting lightly. The wine loosened us. She sipped, then sighed. "It's complicated with him." I asked, "How so?" And she leaned back. "He's distant, even when here." I nodded, "Sounds tough." And she continued, "I think he's seeing someone." The confession hung heavy, and I said, "That's rough," feeling her pain. The wine warmed us, and I thought, she's opening up the balcony a confessional. Her story unfolded. "He's away weeks, barely calls," she said, swirling her glass. I replied, "That's not fair," and she nodded, "I deserve better." We drank more, the sunset fading, and she added, "Sometimes I wonder why I stay." I offered, "You're strong to handle it," and she smiled, "Thanks, Michael." The shared vulnerability drew me, and I felt my heart shift, love creeping in. The night grew intimate. "You're easy to talk to," she said, her voice soft, and I replied, "Same with you." The wine bottle emptied, and she laughed. "We killed it," lightening the mood. I said, "Good company," and she touched my arm briefly. I needed this. The contact lingered, and I thought, I'm falling for her. The closeness unexpected but real. We lingered. The stars appeared, and she said, "This view's worth it." Looking at me, I smiled, "Glad you think so," and she added, "It's nice not being alone." I nodded, "Tell me about it," and we sat, the silence comfortable. "He doesn't get me like this," she murmured, and I felt a pang. I could, but kept it in, the love growing quietly. The evening wound down. "I should go," she said, standing, and I replied, "Any time you need this view." She smiled, "Thanks, Michael," and I walked in the door, saying, "Take care." Alone I sat, the wine glass in hand, and muttered, "I'm in trouble. The attraction now love, her troubles with her boyfriend a crack in my resolve." The next day at work, a co-worker asked, "Good night?" And I said, "Yeah, surprisingly, the feeling new but strong." After that night on the balcony, something shifted between Ava and me, a quiet current that grew with each meeting. The next day, I saw her in the hall, her hair loose, and smiled, "Morning, Ava." She returned it, "Hey, Michael," her eyes lingering a moment longer than usual. We stood there, the air charged, and I felt a pull, saying, "Good sunset last night, huh?" She nodded, "Best I've seen," and our hands brushed as she adjusted her bag, the touch electric but brief. I stepped back, thinking, this is new, the flirtation starting to bloom. Our interactions deepened. A few evenings later, I was on my balcony, and she appeared across the way, leaning on the railing. "Nice night," I called, and she replied, "Yeah, peaceful." I invited, "Come over if you want," and she hesitated, then said, "Maybe later." The next day, she knocked, a book in hand. Thought we could read together. We sat on the couch, knees almost touching, and I said, "Good choice," the nearness stirring me. "Thanks for the company," she murmured, and I felt the connection grow. The flirtation intensified. One afternoon, we met at the coffee machine in the lobby, and she laughed. "You're here again?" I grinned, habit, I guess, and poured her a cup, our fingers grazing. "Careful," she teased, her smile warm, and I replied, "Wouldn't want to spill." We sat on the steps, talking about nothing, weather, work, her leg brushing mine accidentally. "Sorry," she said, but didn't move, and I thought, she feels it too. The tension a quiet thrill. The glances became charged. One evening, I cooked dinner, the kitchen warm with spices, and saw her on her balcony, watching me. I waved, hungry, and she called back, "Maybe." Later, she stopped by, "Smells good," and we ate together, her elbow near mine on the table. "You're a chef," she joked, and I laughed. "Hardly," our eyes locking. The near touch as she passed the salt sent a shiver, and I muttered, "This is getting complicated." The attraction undeniable. The kiss came unexpectedly. One night, after a long talk on my balcony, the stars bright, she stood to leave. "Thanks, Michael," she said, stepping close, and before I could respond, she kissed me. Quick, soft, on the lips, then pulled back. "Good night," she whispered, hurrying off. I stood there, stunned, touching my mouth, thinking, did that happen? A rush of happiness hit, and I said, wow. The moment replaying, my heart racing with joy. I was confused but elated. The next morning, I paced my apartment, muttering, what does it mean? A friend called, good day, and I said, yeah, something happened, keeping it vague. I replayed the kiss, her lips, her retreat, and smiled. She likes me. But doubt crept in. What about her boyfriend? I sat on the couch, the cushion sinking, and decided, I'll figure it out. The happiness outweighing the uncertainty. She disappeared. Days passed, and her balcony stayed empty, the book and cigarette gone. I knocked on her door, no answer, and muttered, where is she? A neighbor shrugged, think she's away. I checked my phone, no messages, and thought, maybe with him. The silence stretched, and I said, hope she's okay. The kiss of memory I clung to, the happiness tinged with worry. The wait grew longer. A week in, I saw her building's lights off and paced. She's really gone. A friend texted, miss her, and I replied, yeah, a bit. The truth slipping out. I stood on my balcony, the night quiet, and thought, that kiss meant something. The joy fading into confusion. Word dragged, a co-worker asking, distracted? And I said, just thinking, the absence heavy. I pieced it together. One evening, I cooked alone, the pan sizzling, and muttered, she went with her boyfriend. The kiss replayed, her warmth, her rush, and I said, maybe it was a mistake. A neighbor waved, quiet lately, and I nodded, yeah, too quiet. The happiness lingered, but the disappearance stung, and I thought, I need to know. The connection now a question mark. The next day at work, someone asked, all good? And I forced a smile, working on it, the weight of testing my feelings. The days after Ava's disappearance stretched on, her empty balcony a constant reminder of that kiss and her sudden absence. I kept my routine, work, walks, balcony time, trying to shake the confusion. One evening, as I locked my door, I heard footsteps below and glanced down the stairs. A tall guy, confident stride, emerged with Ava, his arm around her. That must be him. I muttered, my stomach tightening. He laughed, a deep sound, and she smiled, but his face nagged at me, familiar, yet out of place. I watched from a distance. They stepped outside, and he opened the car door for her, saying, good trip? She nodded. Yeah, tiring. Her voice soft. I leaned against the wall, thinking, her boyfriend's back, the kiss replaying in my mind. He was broad-shouldered, dressed sharp, and exuded control, a stark contrast to her usual sadness. Who is he? I whispered, the sight stirring unease. A neighbor passed, new guy, and I shrugged, maybe, keeping it casual. The familiarity grew. The next day, I saw him again, unloading bags from the car, Ava trailing behind. Need help? She asked, and he grinned. Got it, babe. I stood on my balcony, the railing cold under my hands, and studied his profile. Strong jaw, dark hair. Where have I seen him? I said to myself, the memory elusive. A friend called, busy day, and I replied, just watching, my focus on him. The resemblance haunted me, a ghost from my past. The realization hit. 2 days later, I was at the coffee shop down the street, sipping a latte, when he walked in alone. He ordered, his voice carrying, and I froze, that laugh, that stance. No way. I muttered, the pieces clicking. He turned, and I saw it clear as day. My old best friend Jake, the one I'd lost after my breakup with Sarah. Jake! I said under my breath, the shock hitting like a punch. He didn't notice me, paying and leaving, but the connection stunned me. I pieced it together. Back home, I sat on the couch, the cushion sagging, and thought, Jake and Ava? Our friendship had ended when Sarah chose him, a betrayal that broke us. Was he with her then? I asked myself, the timeline fuzzy. I remembered late nights with Jake, beers, laughs, all gone after that fight. She knew him. I said aloud, the balcony girl linked to my past. A neighbor knocked, all good? And I nodded, just thinking, the shock deepening. The evidence mounted. I dug out old photos, the box creaking open, and flipped through. There he was, Jake, grinning with me at a barbecue. Same guy. I muttered, his face matching the man with Ava. A text from a friend, heard about your neighbor? And I replied, more than you know, the realization sinking. I paced, saying, Ava's with Jake, the betrayal from years ago echoing in this new hurt. I watched them. That evening, they stood on her balcony, her laughing at something he said. Happy now. I whispered, bitterness rising. He kissed her forehead, and I turned away muttering, "My best friend." A coworker called, "Long day," and I said, "You have no idea." The shock await. The balcony view, once a comfort, now stung. Jake's present a reminder of lost trust. The stun grew. I sat with coffee, the mug warm, and thought, how did I miss this? The breakup with Sarah, Jake's shift, Ava's sadness. It all connected. She knew. I said, the piece is fitting. Her boyfriend's absences, her loneliness. A friend stopped by, "What's up?" And I replied, "Old ghosts." The shock paralyzing. The apartment felt smaller. Jake's return a blow to my new start. I grappled with it. The next morning, I walked past their building, seeing him leave, and muttered, "Jake of all people." A shopkeeper waved, "Nice day." And I forced a smile. Yeah, my mind racing. Back home, I stood on the balcony, the railing steadying me, and said, "This changes everything." The shock lingered his face, once a brother's, now a stranger's with Ava, and I felt the past collide with my present. The next day at work, a co-worker asked, "Distracted?" And I nodded, "Just sorting things." The stun a quiet storm. The shock of recognizing Jake as Ava's boyfriend left me reeling, and the days that followed dragged me into a maze of memories and suspicion. I sat on my couch, the cushion sagging, and stared at the wall, muttering, "Jake, my best friend." I remembered our old days, late-night gaming, road trips, the trust we'd built. How did it come to this? I said aloud, "A friend calling, you okay?" And I replied, "Not sure," the phone heavy in my hand. The betrayal from years ago with Sarah now echoed with Ava. I started piecing it together. We'd been inseparable, Jake and me, until Sarah's choice tore us apart. I paced the room, the floor creaking, and thought, he took her, then vanished. A neighbor knocked, "Quiet night," and I nodded, "Yeah, too quiet," my mind racing. I recalled our last fight, his defense of Sarah, my anger, and muttered, "He chose her over me." The memory stung, and now Ava's face tied it all back, a double betrayal brewing. The suspicion grew. Is Ava Sarah? I wondered, sitting with coffee, the mug warm. I thought of her sadness, her story. Could she be my ex under a new name? A co-worker texted, "Busy day," and I said, "Just thinking," the doubt creeping. I remembered Sarah's laugh, her eyes, and compared them to Ava's, similar but changed. Or someone else they both knew? I said, the paranoia starting, my trust unraveling. I dug for proof. In the closet, I found an old box, the lid dusty, and opened it, photos spilling out. "Here we go," I muttered, flipping through. There was Jake, grinning at a beach trip, and Sarah beside him, her smile familiar. I froze, holding a picture, her face altered by time, but there. "Ava." I whispered, the resemblance hitting. A friend stopped by, "What's that?" And I said, "Old stuff," hiding my shock. The photo trembled in my hand, anger rising. The realization deepened. I spread the photos on the table, the paper crinkling, and studied them. Sarah's hair, Ava's posture. Same person. I asked myself, the betrayal doubling. I remembered Jake's excuses after Sarah, his silence, and now Ava's presence. Did she play us both? I said aloud, the paranoia spiking. A neighbor waved from the window. "All good," and I forced a smile. Yeah, the anger simmering. The anger took hold. I paced, muttering, Jake knew and she did too. I thought of her kiss, her confessions, and growled, "A setup." The apartment felt claustrophobic, and I said, "They used me." A friend called, heard from her, and I snapped, "No, and I don't want to." The rage clear. I slammed a drawer, the sound sharp, and thought, double-crossed by my best friend and her. The paranoia spread. Late that night, I sat with a beer, the bottle cold, and stared at the photos. Was she watching me all along? I wondered, imagining plots. A text from a co-worker, "Long night?" And I replied, "You could say that." The suspicion growing. I checked the window, her balcony dark, and muttered, "What's her game?" The anger and fear mixed, my mind a storm of betrayal. I recalled more. We'd shared everything, Jake and me, secrets, plans, until Sarah. I thought he took her, then sent Ava. The photos showed parties, laughs. All lies now. She dated us both? I said, the idea maddening. A neighbor's dog barked, and I jumped, muttering, "Get a grip," but the paranoia held. The beer went flat, and I said, "They planned this." The double betrayal await. The spiral continued. The next day, I avoided the stairs, fearing a sighting, and thought, was she still here? Word dragged, a manager asking focused, and I said, trying, the anger boiling. I imagined conversations, Jake laughing, Ava plotting, and growled, I was a fool. The photo stayed on the table, a silent accusation, and I muttered, I'll confront them, the rage fueling plans. The night closed in. I sat by the window, the street quiet, and said, they betrayed me twice. The photos, Jake, Sarah, Ava, blurred together, and I thought, my friend and my love gone. A friend texted, need to talk? And I replied, later. The paranoia is shield. The anger peaked, and I stood muttering, I'll get answers. The double betrayal fire I couldn't quench. The next day at work, a co-worker asked, rough week? And I nodded, you have no idea. The storm unresolved. The anger and paranoia from discovering Ava's connection to Jake drove me to act. I couldn't let it fester anymore. One evening, I saw her on her balcony, alone, and decided it was time. I knocked on her door, my heart pounding, and she opened it, surprised. Michael, what's up? She asked, her voice hesitant. I stepped in, saying, we need to talk, my tone firm. She nodded. Okay, come in. And I entered, the air thick with tension. I started direct. Is Ava your real name? I asked, watching her face. She blinked, of course, why? And I pressed, or is it Sarah? Her eyes widened and she stammered, what are you talking about? I pulled out the old photo from my pocket, showing her and Jake, and said, this is you, isn't it? She paled. Where'd you get that? And I replied, my past. You knew Jake, my best friend. The silence was heavy, her mask cracking. She denied at first. I don't know what you mean, she said, turning away, but I stepped closer. Don't lie. You're with him now. She shook her head. It's not like that. And I snapped, then explained to Kiss the stories. A neighbor's door creaked, and she lowered her voice. Keep it down. I waited, the photo trembling in my hand, and said, I deserve the truth. Her resistance weakened, the denial fading. The admission came. Okay, fine, she sighed, sitting on her couch, the cushion sinking. I was different back then, Sarah, yes. But I wanted a new start. I stared with me, and she nodded. I didn't plan it. I asked, and Jake? She looked down. He knows you're here, but he thinks it's old news. I felt a surge of anger. Old news? He betrayed me first. She flinched. It's complicated. And the mask began to fall. She explained more. After you and Sarah, me, split, Jake and I got close, she said, her voice low. I interrupted. He took you from me. And she shook her head. It wasn't like that. I changed, moved on. I paced, muttering, and now you're playing me again? She stood. No, I liked you genuinely. I laughed bitterly. Like me enough to kiss me? And she fell silent, the truth unraveling. The revelation stung. He knew about us? I asked, and she nodded. He mentioned you, but said it was nothing. I clenched my fist. Nothing? He was my brother. She reached out. Michael, I'm sorry. But I pulled back, saying, sorry doesn't cut it. A friend texted, you good? And I ignored it, focused on her. You both use me, I said, the feeling of being a pawn sinking in. She tried to justify. I wanted to leave that life behind, she said, tears welling. I asked by lying to me, and she wiped her eyes. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought of the kiss, the balcony nights, and growled, you played a game. She sobbed. It wasn't a game at first, and I replied, but became one. The apartment felt smaller. Her confession a mirror to my naivety. The confrontation escalated. Does he know about the kiss? I demanded, and she shook her head. No, and please don't. I laughed, protecting him now. She pleaded, it's not that he'd lose it. I stepped back. I should tell him. And she grabbed my arm. Don't, Michael. I shook her off, saying, you don't get to decide. The anger boiling. A neighbor's TV hummed to the wall, unnoticed. I felt used. You and Jake set this up, I said, my voice cold, and she cried, no, it just happened. I thought of our talks, her loneliness, and muttered, all lies. She stood. I meant some of it, and I snapped, not enough. The photo lay on the table, a silent witness, and I said, I was a toy to you both. Her tears fell, but I felt nothing but betrayal. The end neared. I'm done here, I said, heading for the door, and she called, wait, let's fix this. I turned, there's no fixing this, and walked out, the door clicking shut. Alone, I leaned against the hall wall, muttering, they played me. A friend called, heard shouting, and I said, yeah, it's over. The mask's fallen, leaving me raw. The next day at work, a co-worker asked, rough night, and I nodded. You could say that. The sting of use lingering. The confrontation with Ava left me hollow. The truth of her and Jake's betrayal a weight I couldn't carry. I knew I had to escape, cut them out completely. The next morning, I started packing, the boxes rustling as I threw in clothes, muttering, I'm done here. A neighbor knocked, moving again, and I nodded, yeah, new start. The apartment, once a refuge, now felt tainted, and I said, no more of this. The decision firm. I blocked her. On my phone, I scrolled Ava's number, her text still unread, and hit block, the action final. No more lies. I said, deleting her messages. A friend called, her about the fight, and I replied, yeah, I'm out. My voice steady. I blocked Jake, too, his old contact a ghost, and muttered, both of you. The silence after was a relief, but the sting of use lingered, pushing me to move. The move began. I found a new place, a small flat across town, and signed a lease, the pen scratching the paper. Fresh air, I told the landlord, who smiled. Good choice. I packed boxes, the tape loud, and thought, they don't get to hurt me again. A co-worker helped, asking, why the rush? And I said, personal stuff, keeping it vague. The truck loaded and I drove off, the old building fading, the pain a companion. Doubts crept in. Unpacking, I sat on the new couch, the fabric stiff, and wondered, did they both use me? I thought of Ava's kiss, Jake silent, and muttered, or were they hurting too? A friend texted safe move, and I replied, yeah, settling, but my mind raced. Maybe Jake felt guilty, I said aloud, pacing, the idea softening the anger. The new walls echoed, and I asked, was it all a game? I wrestled with it. Late that night, I cooked dinner, the pan sizzling, and thought, Ava seemed real at first. The wine from our balcony night flashed, and I said, maybe she was trapped. A neighbor waved from the hall, new face, and I smiled, just moved in, but inside I wondered, did Jake push her to me? The food tasted bland, and I muttered, I'll never know. The pain, a mix of betrayal and pity. The video idea hit. I grabbed my phone, the screen bright, and started recording, this is for me. I spoke, Ava, Jake, you broke me twice. I trusted you both. The camera caught my frown, and I added, I don't know if you planned it, but it hurt. A friend knocked, dinner, and I paused later, resuming with, I'm letting go. The words felt raw, the pain of release, but I saved it, not sending. I processed more. The next day, I edited the video, the footage jerky, and said, Jake took Sarah, then sent Ava. I paced the new kitchen, muttering, or she chose him, then me. A co-worker called, settled in, and I said, getting there, but my mind spun. Were they suffering too? I wondered, the letter growing. I wrote, I was a pawn, but maybe you were too. The pain is shared burden. The release began. I watched the video again, the sound tinny, and thought, this is my truth. I didn't send it, tucked it away, saying, for me, not them. A neighbor asked, long day, and I nodded, yeah, unpacking, the excuse easy. The letter joined it, and I muttered, I choose this pain to move on. The new place felt safer, the ties cut, the hurt a lesson. The night settled. I sat by the window, the street quiet, and said, they're gone from my life. The video and letter stayed unsent, a private purge, and I thought, I own this now. A friend texted, proud of you, and I replied, thanks, needed that. The pain lingered, but I added, it's mine to carry, the choice empowering. The next day at work, a co-worker asked, better spot, and I said, yeah, much, the healing starting. Months slipped by since I left the old place, and the new apartment became my sanctuary. The quiet mornings, the sun streaming in, felt like a reward. I woke one day, stretching, and muttered, finally alone. A neighbor knocked, an older woman with a smile, settling in, and I nodded, yeah, getting there. The pain of Ava and Jake had dulled, and I picked up my guitar, the strings humming under my fingers. Back to this, I said, the music a return to myself. I rediscovered creation. Evenings found me sketching, the pencil scratching paper, old habits resurfacing. Feels right, I murmured, drawing a balcony scene, empty now. A friend called, heard you're playing again, and I laughed, yeah, dusting off the rust. The drawings piled up, shapes of windows and streets, and I thought, this is healing. A co-worker stopped by, nice work, and I grinned, thanks, just messing around. The art of quiet joy. The balcony drew me. I stood by my new window, the view different but familiar, and looked toward where hers would have been. Nothing but a blank wall now. Gone, I said, no anger in my voice. A neighbor waved, good view, and I replied, yeah, peaceful, the emptiness of relief. I remembered her sadness, the kiss, and muttered, not mad anymore, the reflection softening the past. The guitar played on, a melody for letting go. Time brought clarity. One afternoon I cooked, the kitchen warm with spices, and thought, Ava's face fades. The photos, the betrayal, felt distant, and I said, just a memory. A friend texted, how's the new spot? And I answered, good, really good. The truth settling. I sketched her balcony, the lines gentle, and added, pain's part of it, the realization growing. The meal tasted better, and I hummed, the music companion. The anger lifted. Late nights, I played soft tunes, the notes filling the room, and stared at the wall. No hate left. I said, the guitar steady my hands. A neighbor's dog barked, and I laughed. Quiet life now. I thought of Jake's laugh, Ava's tears, and muttered, they had their reasons, the reflection forgiving. A co-worker called, busy night. And I said, just creating the piece solid. I embraced the lesson. One evening, I drew a self-portrait. The lines were up but honest, and said, this is me. The balcony memory lingered, but I added, pain's an experience, not a life sentence. A friend visited, looking better, and I nodded, feeling it too. The sketches grew, streets, skies, and I thought, I've grown. The music and art a mirror to my soul. The apartment hummed with my rhythm. The solitude strengthened. I played a new song, the chords fresh, and muttered, no more ghosts. A neighbor asked, music night, and I smiled, yeah, working on it. I looked at the empty space where her balcony had been, saying, she's not there, the reflection clear. The pain from Ava and Jake became a teacher, and I added, I'm past it. The guitar testament. A friend texted, proud of you, and I replied, thanks, earned it. The days flowed. I cooked again, the pan sizzling, and sketched while the food cooled, muttering, balance now. The balcony's absence didn't hurt, and I said, just a chapter. A co-worker stopped by, new tune, and I played a bit, in progress, the creation release. I thought of their betrayal, the kiss, and added, pain shapes, doesn't break, the reflection a quiet strength. The night closed with peace. I sat by the window, the street still, and played softly, saying, this is my life. The empty balcony space held no sting, and I muttered, experience, not a curse. A friend called, how's it going? And I answered, better every day. The truth firm. The guitar rested, and I thought, I've let go. The reflection a mirror to a healed heart. The next day at work, someone asked, happy now? And I nodded finally, the pain a distant lesson. Time moved forward, and my new life settled into a rhythm of peace I'd fought to earn. One afternoon, while scrolling through my phone over lunch, a news alert popped up, something about a local breakup drama. I clicked curious and froze. Jake and Ava split, the headline read, with a blurry photo of them arguing outside a cafe. No way. I muttered, the screen glowing in my hands. A co-worker leaned over. Anything good? And I said, just news, keeping it light, the revelation sinking in. I processed it. Back home, I sat on my couch, the fabric soft now, and thought, they're done. The guitar rested nearby, and I strummed idly, muttering, after all that. A friend called, heard about your old neighbors? And I replied, yeah, saw it online, my tone neutral. I remembered their balcony, her kiss, his betrayal, and said, good riddance. But the news stirred old echoes. The apartment felt steady, and I added, their mess, not mine. Ava reached out. A few days later, a mutual friend texted, Ava asked about you. I stared at the screen. What did she say? And he replied, wants to talk, feels bad. I shook my head, not interested, and blocked the number, muttering, she's done. Another friend called, she's persistent, and I said, let her be, the disinterest firm. I thought of her tears, her lies, and said, no more games. The closure near. The attempts continued. One evening, a co-worker mentioned, someone asked me for your new address, and I asked, who? He shrugged. Thing was Ava's friend. I sighed, told him nothing, and he nodded, got it. I stood on my balcony, the night cool, and muttered, she won't let go. A neighbor waved quiet night, and I smiled, yeah, just me, the piece unshaken. I thought, not revenge, just done, the door closing in my mind. I reflected on it. The next day, I sketched, the pencil steady, and thought, she's lost without Jake. The news replayed their fight, her sadness, and I said, I moved on. A friend stopped by, heard she's a mess, and I replied, not my problem. The detachment clear. I played a tune, the note soft, and muttered, pain taught me the lesson holding. The apartment hummed, and I added, her choice to reach out. The silence held. A week later, another friend texted, Ava's asking through old contacts, and I wrote back, ignore her. I sat with coffee, the mug warm, and said, she doesn't get it. A co-worker called, busy day. And I said, just living, the focus on now. I thought of the kiss, the betrayal, and muttered, I'm past that. The disinterest a shield. The news of their split faded, a footnote. The test came. One afternoon, I walked past my old building, the brick familiar, and saw her silhouette in the window, alone. There she is, I said, keeping my eyes forward. A shopkeeper waved, back for old times, and I smiled, just passing, not looking up. I thought, no anger, no pull. The closed door firm. A friend texted, saw her, and I replied, yeah, didn't care. The peace intact. I moved on. That evening I cooked, the kitchen alive with scents, and played music, the sound filling the space. This is me. I muttered, the guitar friend. A neighbor asked, good meal? And I nodded, yeah, simple joy. I thought of Ava's attempts, Jake's absent, and said, their story's over for me. The apartment glowed, and I added, I choose my path, the closure complete. The night ended with resolve. I sat by the window, the street quiet, and strummed, saying, no looking back. The old building's image faded, and I muttered, doors shut. A friend called, how's life? And I answered, better than ever, the truth solid. I thought of their split, her reach, and added, not my burden, the closed door a symbol of freedom. The next day at work, someone asked, all good? And I grinned more than the past a distant echo.